warm welcome to all the participants and our eminent speaker for today, author, architect, urban planner, architect Sulakshana Mahajan. I am Dr. Roshni Yehuda, President of the Institute of Environmental Architecture and Research. This is a Mumbai-based educational research and training institute with a vision to create a sustainable environment through scientific research, education and training, socio-cultural understanding, community engagement and awareness. We are a multidisciplinary group comprising of architects, planners, ecologists, engineers, botanists, microbiologists, lawyers, and we are all academicians. We have come together to form this organization after working collaboratively for nearly or more than 15 years. Our mission in this organization is Environment First. We started the webinar series during the lockdown period and as a way of sharing knowledge with experts and learning from them, learning from practitioners in the field, and also to learn through interaction, that is questions and discussions with all the participants. Today, we'll be discussing a topic that is little known, but has a great influence on our, let's say, individual success and, and our survival as a species, as a race, looking at a macro perspective. A rather difficult subject, but then again, we also have architect Sulakshana Mahajan, who's perhaps one of the few people who has explored and who has talked about this subject. Today's subject is environment psychology, and we are looking at it from the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic, of course, because it is going to change our behavior, or it will change our behavior towards the environment in more ways than one. This subject was part of our master's program in environmental architecture that was conducted under the aegis of the Rachna Sansad Institute of Environmental Architecture and the YCMOU Nashik. So today we will try to learn and discuss in a very short period of time, though, about the subject of environmental psychology, which is an interdisciplinary field that studies the interplay between individuals and their surroundings. It encompasses natural environments, social environments, built environments, and also our learning environments, and also the informational environments, that is our communications. And to introduce to you, it is my absolute privilege to introduce to our speaker of today, architect Sulakshana Mahajan. Sulakshana has a bachelor's degree in architecture from Sir J.J. College of Architecture, Mumbai, and a postgraduate diploma in industrial design from IIT Mumbai, and has also partially completed UTEP core courses from the University of Michigan. She has nearly 50 years of experience as architect and urban planner, having worked with the MDP Consultant Netherlands, as a chief architect of Epicons, senior architect Guernsey Eastern Limited, scientific officer DARC, and planning assistant, town planning department, Thane government of Maharashtra. She retired as a consultant on urban planning, housing, transport, and environmental issues related to Mumbai metropolitan region at the Mumbai Transformation Support Unit, MTSU Mumbai. She has also authored several books in Marathi and English pertaining to urban planning and economics. Some of these are Jag Badalle, Arth Srushti, Bhav Ani Swabhav, London Nama, Concrete Vanarai, Asavi Shehere Apli Chan, and Smart City for All. She has lectured in several colleges, including Sir J.J. College of Architecture, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and Rachna Sansad's Institute of Environmental Architecture. She has also been part of many social initiatives, including the Parisar Vikas Yojana of the Sri Mukti Sangatna and several others. She has contributed immensely to the sustainable urban planning through her writings, through actual involvement in planning and implementation as well. So that, friends, is the introduction of this multifaceted personality, Sulakshana Mahajan. It's my pleasure to introduce her. Over to you, Sulakshana.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Roshni. Am I unmuted or?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Roshni, for the introduction. I think it was, I thought it was somebody else's, not mine. Anyway, thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting me to speak on this subject, because I used to teach this subject at Rachana Samsad right from the first year we started environmental architecture, and I used to give lectures. So I have to cover so many subjects, so many lectures in a very short period of 45 minutes today. I'll try to do that. It's a tough task, but let me assure you, I'll do my best. But many things have to be skipped. I have prepared a PowerPoint. You may see all the points, but I may speak on few of the PowerPoint points on the presentation, because I think they're all relevant, but we won't have time for that. So I will request Roshni and to start the presentation, so that we can right away start the presentation. So this is environmental psychology. It's a very different kind of a subject, and I learned about it, most of it, in my stay at the University of Michigan, and I was so fascinated. So when I came back, I thought it should be included in our curriculum for architects, because we really don't understand environment on one part, and we don't understand people and their psychology on the other part, and we live in our own imaginary conceptual world, and we hope that what we create in our urban and rural environments from through architecture, sometimes or many times it does not satisfy the needs of society, and it also many times is determinant to the environment. So I find it's very, very important that we understand our environment and we understand ourselves, not as an individual, but as a human species, and what generally people expect, what people like, as a at a general level. And of course, people have specific needs and specific choices, but on the whole, we must understand the psychological framework of people, and especially today when we all are confined to limited environment. Everything has been shut off. For last 3 months, I haven't been out in the city. I haven't seen this experience what is happening on the streets. I don't know what's happening in the city. I don't know what's happening in my neighborhood. I can't see anyone. I can't meet anyone except on the virtual platform like this. I can talk to somebody. I can see everyone on the screen, but it's rarely I meet anyone. And this is, in a way, in a way, it's a terrible time. At the same time, it gives me a lot of space and to think about what is what is it that I'm caring most after so many years. In any case, I have retired, so my active life was quite getting limited. Till March 15, I was traveling, and when I came back, and suddenly I'm bound to home. So let's go and see what is environmental psychology first. Next slide, please. Can we go to next slide? Yeah. So what we are trying to do is the environment has always been very complex. Whether it's a city, sometimes we know very few parts of city or a street or our neighborhood. We don't know the complete city in a one go unless we study it. But still, even if I study, Bombay is very complex. And to make sense of all those systems of Bombay, we don't make a coherent picture of Mumbai. What is it? What is it like? It's very difficult to define it or tell you anyway what is Mumbai city. Similarly, if we go to a jungle or a forest in near Mumbai, it's very difficult to tell what is the forest experience like. It's also complex. We may tell we saw some streams, we saw some water bodies, we saw some trees, we saw some birds, some animals, but why everything was there? Why only so many animals were there? Why, where, which animals, and why did they were there? Which birds? So the legibility of each forest is different. Like every city is different. So in a way, you man-made cities as well as natural settings, forest, even the sea coast, they are all mystery to us unless we try to address ourselves and go into detail. We can't understand what's happening with the seashore, what's happening with the underwater environment. Of course, we are able to study. That's a different thing. So basically, environmental psychology says that it 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 studies the interaction and relationship between people and their environment. Why some people on the ground floor? Why some people only want to stay on the 10th floor, and some people want to stay. They will pay a lot of price to go and have a residence in a forest, or they never go to forest because some people are scared. So all these relationships are somehow related to our psychological framework. So we are going to study a little about psychology of environment and people. And what I'm going to do is that not in a linear fashion. I'm trying to get into some of the theory, some of the practices, some of the experiences, and also relate them to the pandemic, so that it's not a very structured presentation or a subject I'm presenting. I know it's very short time, so I thought let it be little jumbled up and not very straightforward. Like in 10 lectures, I have to cover so many topics. So next slide, please. Next, yeah. So basically, we must understand that we are only on the earth for last really as Homo sapiens for only last say about a million years. That is 10 lakh years. But really, the way we are, the way we think, our brain thinks, and it's only what we can say is only 50,000 years. So you can see on this time scale bacteria and of course viruses grew before bacteria, and we are at the fag end of the whole earth's life. So we are occupying a second of, not even a second of time span of the living world which is around us, which we call the natural environment, which evolved of course much before, in millions of years before even the first life was born on the earth, like a virus or bacteria or amoeba, whatever it is. And so we are at the fag end. So you can see, and even in last 5,000 years or 50,000 years, the history of human beings like us, our history, is not necessarily going from better, worse to better. It's not like that. Never has been like that. Many times human beings have gone back into the space and time, have lost whatever they have gained. So certainly the progress has not been one single line and very uniform, and where we have reached today. Of course, pandemic must give us a shock. Yes, we can't take environment for granted. We can't take the biology for granted. We can't take viruses for granted. We are vulnerable as we were in when we were in jungle. So the Earth's creatures have evolved like us. We have also evolved. All creatures have evolved through a series of contingent and fortuitous events which were not in anyone's hand. They were beyond us. They were part of the biological process, the chemical process, biochemical process, and everyone has evolved and sustained or got extinct in the process. So what is our struggle today is for not getting extinct, survival, and also creating a different kind of life for not only us, for all the creatures on the earth. So in a way, we are also responsible for our environment, and we are also responsible for the earth's environment, which actually gives which is home to thousands and millions of bacteria and animals and birds and fantastic life, natural life. Next. So we must understand evolution, our biological roots. What are they? I'm talking to you. Was the speech always with us? Never. Today we walk on 2 feet and we have 2 hands. Was this the space? Not at all. What we have is 3D vision, which is very rare among all the species on the earth. Many animals don't have even vision, like bats. They don't have vision. Have only the sound to guide them in the space and time. So we are a very different kind of species. We have a 3D and we have a color vision. Most of the animals don't have color vision and they never have, because of 3D we have depth. So we have distance, we can judge how far we are from a particular location, how far is the sea from after looking even at the environment, we can imagine how far is the some target where we are want to reach. So these 4 limbs. Earlier, we were, of course, all apes and gorilla, like monkeys, the primates. And we used to work with our 4 limbs. There were no 2 hands or 2 legs, and most of our life was developed in arboreal infancy. So our infancy was spent in forest, in a green cover on top of the trees. And all that top of the trees has lot of to do with our craving for greenery and colors and sounds and birds and smells of fruits and flowers. So in a way, our senses developed actually when our ancestors were on the tree and we had 4 limbs and 3D vision and our hands used to be part of, they were limbs not specialized to hold something and read like a mouse icon, but they were hands and we had a special hand and special hand in the sense our hand is not flat like many other 4 limb animals. They can't hold something in their hand. We can hold any tool in our hand, carry it when we are walking. When we were jumping from tree to tree, we also used to carry fruits and twigs and flowers and whatnot. So we could manage on 3 limbs and 1 hand could be sufficient to carry something. So it was a different kind. One can't imagine. Of course, you will have to recreate. You will have to recreate and imagine what could have been our life. We never used to sleep horizontally. Mostly it was on the trees, on the branches, and so it was a different life. And we had limited procreation. That is the typical human beings. The females only have mostly one child at a time, and the period of birth and it's very long compared to another animal. Then something happened in Africa. The forest got destroyed, and we had to come down on the earth. And actually, that's why you may sometimes many people still have this when they look down from a very high ground or upper levels or from the tree top, they get giddiness. They feel faint. And that is the feeling, and we lose balance. Many times we lose balance. We have fear of falling down, and that's why that fear, all this psychological processes are part of our life on we have got it from the life on the trees. Then we started, of course it was a long millions of years again. When we got down on the land, we couldn't walk on 4 legs, and uh, because there was savanna is a very high tall grasses, and then if you are on the 4 limbs you can't see where to get food for, so you have to start climbing. So that is how we developed 2 legs and 2 hands. So we started walking on legs in millions of years, and still use the hands like monkeys. It developed because of the opposable thumb. We can still hold we can hold tools and we can hold mouse. But what happened by holding this, our hands and our brain developed together. And the hand gives us, we can grip something, look at it. Necessarily, we will see whether we can eat it or have a look at it, and aesthetics and color and beauty and shape and texture and everything. So that started affecting our brain. So it's a long process. Again, the hand, the activities, and our brain started developing. When we got on the earth was full of all the animals, and everyone had a niche, and everyone had a specialty. Somebody had speed of running away from the and getting killed. Somebody had very small creeping. Somebody, everyone, so many animals had big teeth. Some had claws. They could fight and all that. What was the material for human beings? Nothing. They didn't run as fast as many animals. They couldn't crawl like small animals like rabbits and all that. They didn't have that kind of, and still they had to survive. So for survival, the whole thing, evolution of our body, our mind started changing, evolving, and the most important part which developed in human beings is brain. And brain with hands and legs. That is how we have the natural gift or natural material or natural tools. What we have is with brain. So composite, but brain is not only psychological and physical, but it is neurological adaptation from forest and savanna living and development of human brain. So our brain is developed and it's still developing. In last 10,000 years, I think it has increased in weight, it has increased in capacity. Our neurological capacities, even at present, even if we say we have become more intelligent, our neurological capacity for memory and processing is 10 times more than what we really use in our lifetime. So we have inherited fascinating mixture of emotions. Not only we have brain with which processes the information, memory is there, of course, and we can store, we can see. We have sensory objects like eyes. Our eyes are the most valuable sensory object, which still today we are using. Even if we are not in the environment, we are using it in the sitting in the front. You can see me, though I can't see you, but you can see me, and you can see the person who is speaking to you. So the eyes, we could see animals, we could see flowers, we could see objects, trees, and our brain started processing the information. For one is for food, but it was not only food. We also started appreciating what is around us, and we started categorizing uh, the different environmental settings and environmental gifts we had around us. And on the next, walking was our another factor. Most animals, of course, walk. They walk in on the ground. They run on the ground. Next slide, please. But human beings can walk miles and miles together. They can't forage. It's called foraging. And most of the animals, the maximum area they travel within their lifetime is 15 square kilometers. And what is our reach in space? Now we can reach whole of Earth. Within 24 hours, I am at the other end. That is what has changed the human brain and intellectual capacity and our processing capacity. The tools have developed, and the most important thing was large cortex in our mammals. Most of the mammals have that, and of course our brain is that. So we process information so quickly, we hardly understand how we process it. Suppose I enter some environment without my understanding, I know this is not right place, I must get out of it. That kind of intellectual capacity the smaller brain has, which bypasses the big brain without telling me that run away, there is the danger to you. And that kind of a not even available to fast computers. Much brain works much faster in case of emergency and not in otherwise. So we have developed that large cortex where intellectual capacity to we can perceive the problem, but we also can see how we can solve the problem. And all our evolution, we have been solving series and series and series of problems. Even today, we are facing pandemic and we are trying to solve the problem. And that is the capacity. So we must trust our brain, but we should not trust mostly our negative. We must understand our emotions and limitations as well as the capacity of our brain. So we have increased susceptibility to emotional disturbances. As you see in this pandemic, it's very difficult for many people to control their own emotions. Some getting depressed, some getting don't understand, so they don't make sense out of it. At home, the space is limited and there is crowding, so the emotions and they flare up. Sometimes they cry. There are many psychological problems reported to the doctors, and it's become a number of suicides, number of fights, number of atrocities on women. They have increased because of the emotional disturbances, susceptibility, where it is increased whenever there is fear of future. Unknown in a powerful fear is the most powerful emotion. As you see, today at the global level, there is a fear of COVID-19. How powerful it is. On the one hand, many people are stuck up. Everything has been closed down and we are stuck up at home and we are trying to cope up, adapt to the situation in some way or the other. But many people are unable to adapt because their resources are less, space is less, understanding is less, knowledge is less, support systems are not there. So they are not really. So in this pandemic, we are seeing there is huge emotional disturbances, psychological disturbances, and we don't know how people will react when the pandemic is over. Still, all these impressions will be carrying in the society, and we still don't know what will be the impact and how they will work on the reality. So fear is less. Today, people like us, you, me, and middle class people, we are quite well sheltered by civilized environment. Water comes to my house. I have enough food. I have enough space to sleep. I have enough gadgets where I can be connected. I don't have to worry about my well-being tomorrow. I can always call a doctor and I can still get the medicine from the shops. So in a civilized environment like this, very few like us are well sheltered. But it is our job now, it's our responsibility that when we are sheltered like this, we must understand there are many more people, more than us, more than our percentage, 70-80% people are completely not sheltered. They are facing terrible times, terrible disruptions in their lives, and they really are not geared or they are not trained how to deal with the situation. You can read how migrants traveled, how people got emotionally disturbed, how yes, 2 days back I just went out to get some medicine and there was a ration shop. In last 15 years, I had not seen a big line for ration shop. Now I could see it. So even though I know I'm not poor, I can see that there is a huge poverty and people are facing terrible times with children, with old people, with not having sufficient support system, not having even toilets and water sufficient for their families, no privacy, not even enough space for social distancing, all that. And majority in India don't have that. So it is our responsibility that in the future, how do we shelter most of our this civilized environment? How can we extend it to majority of people or all the people? That would be our responsibility. See, these emotions are so powerful. On one hand, there are multiple, a whole range of, and in such times, very difficult times, you get two polarized reaction. On one side, you see a lot of agony, lot of anger, lot of unrest, a lot of. But on the other hand, you see altruist behavior. I mean, hundreds of NGOs and people are trying to help each other. Every other day, people are asking, "Can you send us money? Can you send help? Can only thing we can transfer right now is mental support, social structures. We can help whoever is possible. We can transfer money, and money can be transferred with the good hands into people who need. It's not only individually, but through NGOs. Hundreds and thousands of NGOs are working hard, and you see that altruist behavior on one hand, and you see a very selfish behavior on the other hand. The thieves are wearing PPE kits and looting the. That is on the one hand, and there are hundreds of NGOs working night and day to help poor people. So we have this kind of a polarization of emotions in our society, and that is also very typical of difficult times, because society has been our support system all the times, right from the life on the trees or in savannas, when hunting, gathering, food sharing, it's very common. So the responsible for ambivalent nature of humans we must understand, and we must understand what should be my feeling and what are my feelings, and how can I be better person. What is my role in this kind of a pandemic, that if I am a human being which is sensitive enough, I must see what is my role in this pandemic. I'm not just giving lecture, but also suggesting you to think how you can help, not now, but even afterwards, during the pandemic, after the pandemic, our role is going to be much more. So there, many people are faced with boredom. We hate boredom. We really hate boredom, and we also have a lot of capacity to invent work and activity. We exercise, we do something. Many people are finding cooking as interesting. Who never entered kitchen are suddenly doing cooking. So all these activities become interesting when you start applying your mind to it. You're forced to apply mind, and then you start inventing. Humans are inventive, and that is also very special for human beings. We have capacity to invent and capacity to work hard if we decide, and not to get bored in the situations like this pandemic. Next. So brain is our power, and we should use it very, very wisely, and also frugally, and also for altruistic purpose on a very large scale. So adapting to environment was essential for survival, and this adaptation was made possible because brain not only collects lot of sensory information, it processes the information and stores it. So we have a huge memory space. In this pandemic, yesterday I was reading an article. Many people are remembering their childhood times, and they're enjoying that nostalgia. Many people are enjoying nostalgia, and that is very typical of adapting to environment through nostalgia, because it was always very essential for survival in events like this. Even in the hardest time, people go back and try to imagine something which they had learned in their childhood. Say, many people chant poems, they chant mantras, they chant this, they chant that, and it relieves their pain. And so the adapting to environment through our activity brain is very essential for survival, and we have also learned about it through our activity. And this pandemic, please go back and look at yourself, what you did to get over this boredom. How did you engage with different environment? Did you go back to? I'm looking. I really am enjoying some movies which I enjoyed in my younger age, and finding it. My God, how could I have enjoyed that stupid movie or something like that? Whatever it is, songs, music, friends, talking to many groups have come up around the schools, friends, and they are exchanging. So all these are a very essential part of our psychological movement of for survival, very necessary. And we have ranged over larger areas. You must have traveled from place to place. I have traveled all over the world, and this we have so much of information. We can exchange, we can talk, and in the protected territories now we are there. We can exchange, give solace to people who don't have security and food. So we can do that. So psychological need, it's very essential for all of us to have a home. You have seen hundreds and thousands of migrants suddenly wanted to go home. This home-based craving for home is also extremely old need of our human beings, because we need home. All animals don't need home. Many times they go from place to place, they don't come back to the original place. Human beings always come back to their home. What they call their home is where they find the most secure place. And so you should understand why migrants never thought that the city they are working in, even with their family in their huts, they were staying for a few years, or their home was never this, their home was villages. And that craving, that understanding, that home is extremely important space and environment. Even it's not and many people are of course finding out home also is not so comfortable, especially in our villages. Many people in the caste system, they are not welcome. When they have gone from city to the local space, they have been asked to keep distance for 14 days in quarantine. Still they are agreeing to it, but after 14 days, many people are going home, and their children. I know a family where three children and four adults were stuck in a room for 10 by 14 room for 3 months. And the only craving was, I must get out, I must go to village. And that is extreme. I said, they had money, they had enough savings to last here for another 2 years, but it was impossible to live in a small room. And the children, and no activity, and every only activity was looking at the smartphones and phones. And again, one day their charger went off, and they called me, do you have a spare charger? You have to share it. These are the conditions people have stayed, and so they're craving for home. You must understand. And at a larger scale, we must facilitate how the home, wherever they stay, how can we make their lives better and they feel at home in cities, which we have never done. So survival is based on cooperation and food sharing, which of course most of the societies today are doing, and that's natural. We have abundant food. Luckily, we are not able to. We don't have to starve our people. So emotional and social supports are extremely important, which we are not really able to give. We don't know what's happening, where we don't know the people in villages how they are suffering, or we don't know village places where our poor people are living, and on top of it they are facing pandemic, so they are facing double whammy of economic loss, the loss of jobs, loss of health, loss of many people have migrated, the social systems have crumbled down, so they are really vulnerable, and we have to have some empathy for them, and that is also part of it. Yeah. Then, of course, I talked about tools and opposable thumb, that an enlarged brain enhances our skill. So now I've talked to many younger girls and on the phone, that what is your future? They said, now we just can't live with one degree or one kind of a skill. We must have multiple skills. So people have started learning languages, people have started learning skills, and this is a good thing that we are multidisciplinary. So when from engineering one can go to cooking, from cooking one can go to social work and all that. So different skills are going to help. in our survival. Not a unitary skill is not sufficient. So the people have, many young people have realized that the job market is outside not going to be helpful. Their education is in jeopardy and all that. So multi skills, and that is what we are. The whole species is so skillful today, from farming to conservation of environment, and all those kinds of things we can do together if we decide. So that is a very, look at the positive side of it. Next. Uh, so what we have survived till today, but necessarily we have to go beyond that and think of our how we perceive our future and how we perceive our today's time. Perception is one of the powerful way we learn from things. As I said, when there is something, any environment is not safe, especially women immediately think that no, this is, we perceive it as not as a safe place, and we try to get out as fast as we can. But perception is not necessarily always correct. So you have to have perception is a developed sense to for survival in emergencies. But all the days are not emergency. We have to look and give attention to many, many more these days. So perception allows us to organize organizations. We have, see, perception has, in this pandemic, many people had warned that human species as a whole at global level, we may face a pandemic which is going to affect us in maybe in next decade. There were articles, there were warnings given by a number of scientists, number of people, even a person like Bill Gates in 2015, he wrote an article for Americans, and he warned that when there was a SARS and other thing, pandemics, and he had worked for the AIDS affected people over last 20-25 years. So they had some kind of a premonition about the pandemic. That perception they could not, of course, pinpoint, but there was a possibility of such a event and affecting the global, but their warnings were completely neglected. No, everyone thought no, this is because most of us, of course, I also did know. I came to know through another book. My God, people have people have such perceptions of much deeper future, but rest of the people are not able to understand because we are not knowledgeable, we are not understanding, we don't have knowledge about understanding of this viruses, how they jump from animals to human beings, and how would they affect. Of course, the epidemiologists and scientists, they knew this. Similarly, in economics, many people had warned in 2009, like Raghuram Rajan in USA, that there is going to be trouble of economic downturn in 2008 and 9, and people had ridiculed. Even in our own country, our one of our leaders had tweeted that in February that pandemic might be a terrible shock for India. He was ridiculed because people don't have knowledge about such events, and or knowledge that such events have happened in the past and they have affected in last 10 or 15 years or 20 years. These have come in very close times, SARS 1 and 2 and AIDS and many other things. Of course, I don't, I've just read about them. But this sensory information is not necessarily only limited to sensory, but because of the intellectual capacity of the brain, many people have this insight and premonitions of the future, and we must listen to them because we could have avoided such a big tragedy if we had prepared ourselves to face this and prepared our population and people and society to face this. Otherwise, it wouldn't have had come as a shock. So signals prompt actions, but sometimes they are quite late, like this, through physical stimulation, and we don't know these insights how they come. Like architects know how sometimes the concepts just happen, and we are very we struggle for a few months and unable to do, and suddenly one day we get and then we are that mental block is away, and then we can finish the project. Many times it has it, you must have all experienced this. So this kind of a lot of processing of information in our brain gives us time as well as insights, and we can solve the problems. But at the same time, very primary level, when something happens suddenly, there are two or three responses which are still there with us right from the our arboreal ancestry. One is fly away from the danger, another is fight the danger, and third is we don't know what to do and we freeze. All three responses are possible because of our brain and our physiological and psychological. So we have three options: flight, fight, freeze, or act. Act on what? On the problems. We have people have been acting, and we see this flight. We have seen many people denied first that there is no pandemic. Another thing was, okay, we will fight. So everyone is saying a pandemic is like a war. So fight. Now everyone is fighting. But what about people are frozen in their space? They are unable to think. They are depressed. So all three responses we are able to see along the all throughout the world, in all the societies, in all the countries. People are reporting that we are seeing these three responses. But fighting is not necessarily with weapons. Of course, the doctors are fighting in some way, nurses are fighting in other. The actually people affected by the pandemic and affected by coronavirus, they are fighting. Their bodies are fighting. Their families are fighting. Economically, socially, everyone is fighting, fighting, fighting. But there are another kind of people who are fighting to find out the solution, find out way out of this problem, and that is what will give us time and our species for options for survival. Next. So survival is again a basic instinct. Survival, not of me. Of course, I want to live, but everyone has to be. The species, we are trying to save the whole humankind. Attention, and why this has been made possible, because all these years we have been attending to so much of information. Attention leads to creation of mental maps from information. There are people, epidemiologists, who will tell you the history of epidemics in last 500 years. Many people are saying people used to die even in this and that. So there is a long history, and these mental maps are created by people through research, and they can give lecture on that. But the best part of it is because of attention and our skills, all this is recorded orally as well as in text, and it has been communicated. So concepts are generated from information, that how the bacteria kills, that is a big information. Otherwise people were getting killed in London. Within 3 years, one third London was killed in 1830s. One third people died, and average age living expectant life expectancy was 22. Just imagine, at 22 people used to die like flies in London, because no one knew how why people are getting killed. They were getting killed by different kinds of bacteria: smallpox, malaria, cholera, typhoid, whatnot, measles. All those, the simple knowledge of bacteria changed the whole thing. The concept of ailments because of bacteria completely changed the medicinal environment. around human beings. And look at us, we are living 70, average age is now 75, even in India, like life expectancy. So concepts generated from information, lot of information, lot of people collected, knowledge generated. Knowledge building process starts from attention. They started giving attention. Lots of maps were created. You might have heard John Snow, who created map of epidemics in of London, and he identified why only these people are getting killed in a particular area, and he could identify the source of bacteria to a particular well, where the well was, people were drinking water from that well and they were dying. So a simple information processing, knowledge mapping, that led to a big discovery, and and then of course the whole thing changed in London. It's a very fascinating history of knowledge. So knowledge can be communicated, Shweta. How do I know? Dr. Snow is dead for another 100 years back, 200 years back. But Dr. Snow is a revolutionary who changed our lives. Now we have clean water on the taps. That is how we are surviving. Even in this epidemic, we don't have to worry. Many people do have, but that is what we have to extend. Knowledge can be communicated, shared, and that is what environment we are trying to tell, that we have to conserve all the material given to us by nature, let it be water, air, earth, vegetations, all the creatures are very important. All this is interconnected. That knowledge of environment, knowledge of doing something in a better fashion, that has been communicated to us and we can share it, and that is what we are trying to do. So spoken language, symbolic language, like languages, the maps, different languages. Now we have so much facilities that computers are able to translate from one language to other so easily. So knowledge is becoming universal and translated. Now see, even if everyone is hating China today for what they did to India on the borders, but one thing good, the thing they did, the moment they had the genetic code of this COVID-19, they shared it with the world. And for that, their hats off to China, that when they came, they deciphered the genetic code of the COVID-19 virus. They did not keep it to their heart. They did not keep it to themselves. They shared it with all the scientific community of whole of the world. And that's how all today scientists are able to work at different places in different concepts and different knowledge base and different kinds of things. And that is what technology and development of communication is very helpful to us. We must also realize what is good about it, what is bad about it. So role of technology and development of course is important, but of course the kind of technology we should use, kind of knowledge we should use, not to destroy the environment, not to destroy the society, but to create a very just and sustainable society. So learning and teaching for knowledge sharing is extremely important, and we should not hold knowledge to ourselves like Brahmins used to do, that whatever knowledge is their monopoly. That should not be the case. And luckily, we must thank China for sharing their genetic code. Whatever you think of China, at least I will be very we should be thankful to China for sharing this. Next. I think one or two slides and I'm through. So we need, what do we expect from environment? Very simple things. We don't expect our walls should be covered with golden color or silver, everything will be silver. No. What we need is perceptual stability of environment, sufficient space, sufficient clean space to environment with sufficient services like water and sanitation. Stability is one of the dynamic equilibrium. No, you can't store water for the whole year in the rainy season. So we need a lot of recycling and all that. So stability is one of dynamic equilibrium. The water is going to be scared, so let's find out a solution. So equilibrium has to be established because equilibrium always is lost and we have to gain it back. That is a continuous process. You can't take anything for granted for a longer time. And so we seek secured, predictable and interesting environment. Now, as I said, these are interesting time, but they are not predictable. What you are worried about is what is the future like? When will be the will get the antidote for the virus? Everyone is waiting for that. Is there a medicine for treating? No one knows. So that security and predictability is lost. Though we can see that environment is interesting, but it's scary. So what we need is a stable environment, equilibrium, and that can come only through knowledge sharing, giving support, social support, the political support, the economic support to whoever it is. And they also should learn to look into future of planning and everything for sustainability. So we don't like distorting rapid changes or sudden disruptions in environment. Any earthquake, of course, we have smaller events all the time, all over the country, all over the world. Earthquakes happen, there are many epidemics here, and then there are floods there, then there is tsunami, and then there is sea, nuclear warfare, there is a threat of war. So something or the other is there in the environment. Some disruptions do happen. Suddenly lights go off. Now I'm giving a lecture. I don't know whether I take it for granted the electricity won't go. But if it goes, everything is lost. So sudden disruptions create a lot of disturbances in our mind. So somehow we have to also keep in mind that we have to trust that systems will work. 90% of time they will work. Let's not, so we will invent renewable energy. We will try to find out solutions when our coal and nuclear energy is destroying environment. So all the times we must think of society and natural environment and how can we preserve this. And that is the best way to address the issues at any time, not only during pandemic, but that is what environmental psychology is teaches us, that we have to be prepared to interact with environment. There could be stable times and there could be disruptions, but then we should be prepared for disruptions as well if they happen in future. Tomorrow suddenly water is not there in monsoon dry. The monsoon fails. My God, it is a big disruption for India. We have only, so we have to be prepared for that kind of disruption and not think only of how will I get 200 liters of water. I should be worried how we should have equitable distribution of water, recyclable water, water that is clean, water that can be used for greenery and not for wasting on the car. We should have energy that is not wasted, renewable, green energy, building should be green. All these appear, these efforts are to counter the disruptions which we think are going to be in the future. Because one more disruption we always have is the climate change. Are we prepared for that? Climate change is already happening. For 20 years, everyone denied. Most of the leaders of the world were in denial of, but that disruption is going to be there. We have to prepare it. And that is this, our environment. How do we keep our environment stable for most of the people? That is the challenge, not only in this pandemic, but continuous basis. So attention should be given to disruptive events which lead to changes in environment, and they should lead changes in our behavior. Otherwise, we don't learn anything. Again, we go back after the pandemic, we start consuming, we start wasting, we start not segregating, we start energy guzzling vehicles and not using public transport, not walking, not taking care of all this. We should change, our behavior should change, and that is the aim of environmental psychology. Our behavior as architects, as professionals also change. We should also try to get our knowledge to our clients, our people who are going to construct houses for their future, for children. Next, yeah. So human expectations from environment, we have survival need for food and safety. So we don't like disruption in that. So that is why we create lot of stock, which is coming handy today in pandemic. We can distribute food without charging anything. That's a very good thing, satisfying the survival needs of the large number of people. Sense of physical and psychological security, that we are not able to give that sense of physical and psychological security to large number of people, but most people, we will have to think how we can deal with it. How can we provide for migrant workers in future when they come for temporary work for few months, for few years. We have always neglected the migrant should not be in Mumbai. That has been one of the bad movements in Mumbai, which has also killed Mumbai. It doesn't help. We need certainty and sufficient order to judge the future. The future is going to be very tough. The future may not happen in my lifetime, but most of you are young. It can disrupt your lives in, say, after 20 years. You should be prepared how you are going to deal with it. Prepare for it individually, socially, community wise. So that sense of surety and confidence from society you have to create from today itself. You have to be part of the society. You can't be isolated. I will do what I want to do. That is not going to help. We are individuals, we have freedom, but that freedom is again, we have to recognize the limits to our freedom, and then only we will be able to survive. We need variety of supports to keep hope alive for all the people, for the whole of humankind. And that is what we expect from the environment and from the new generation. Next. Yeah, pandemic came as a global unprecedented shock. No one imagined that whole world will be like this. All communication, all the traveling has suddenly come, and we can't travel even 2 miles beyond our most of the home. How difficult? How whole life has changed for everyone. Some people have won but not neglected. I told you, complete disruption of man-made environment. All cities have been disturbed. Now even Chinese cities are coming back, but they must have learnt a lesson. They must be changing their attitudes and planning and all that. They are quite forward looking, unless we live in the past world, in nostalgia, which is not really good for us. We will never be able to catch with the developed world unless we start thinking of future and not Ram Rajya, but the future of our all people. Restriction of movement and normal activities is killing. It's been tough for everyone. Uncertain still future is uncertain. So we have to start thinking in future what I'm going to conserve, what I'm going to preserve, and how I'm going to help the society. That should be what we should be. So dashed hope for young generation. That is one of the major shocks. For me, it's given a lecture, it's okay, but the major disruption is in the lives of students. What almost 1 year has been lost, and many young boys and girls are saying no, home education is good, so they don't have contact with society. They don't have contact with their own peer groups, and people, their language has changed. Many have resulted that children are not speaking the childrenese, they are speaking the adult language. So the young generation is going to be affected much, much more than our generation. So reflexive nostalgia is good for people like me. But I know I can't restore my childhood. But many people, when they know, they live in a history which they have not ever seen. And they have been told that we are restoring the historical golden age of our country. I think we should be those are those are reflect those restorative nostalgias are going to be very tough, and they should be avoided at all cost by especially the younger people. the generation which is going to deal with the future and not people like me. Next. Yeah. So what is going to be the future after COVID-19? It's going to be different for all the people all over the world, for different generation in a different way. So what will be that one? I think it will be polarized. Some people will think business as usual, but that is not going to help. So more attention we need to give to the future human needs, environment, society, and we should be having responsible behavior. And we should work for environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and sustainability goal. All those 11, 17 goals of United States, which have been promulgated, should be adopted personally by each and every one of us wherever we are working, maybe working as a doctor, as a teacher, as a school teacher, as a nurse, or as an architect. All those goals are very, very important, and I think that sustainable development we should give more attention to. And if we give, I think our future will be bright. Otherwise, business as usual will take us from one shock to another. Yeah, I will stop here. Thank you so much. We still have time for some question answers. Yeah, over to Roshni. Roshni, you can take questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sulakshana. It was wonderful listening to you for 1 hour. It felt like back in school when I used to always sit behind and listen to your lectures.
Yeah, thank you.
It is such an interesting topic, and there are so many facets to it. I do see some questions. Let me see if I can take those before, and then I will also add. Yes, I see one question here from Swati Sahasrabuddhe. Can
Yeah.
environmental psychology give answers to structure social behavior post COVID 19?
Of course, it can. It can. So, because this subject itself is very added to the curriculum in Western countries only last 20 years, and I don't see it's been taught and thought of teaching in different levels. There are some schools which have gone into emotional intelligence training, but not environmental psychology training. And there are some psychologists who are working on uh, uh, explaining evolution and our behavior and trying to. There is one doctor. It's called rational emotive behavior courses. Those are also important, but somehow we have to expand this field of environmental psychology. And I've been teaching it at Rachana Samsad, but now that environmental architecture course itself has been disconnected. But I think all architectural and engineering colleges, because we are not geared to understand the biological processes, the biochemical processes and interaction. But it's very, very interesting. See, mathematics, physics is very simple as far as I understand, because you get a huge number of marks and you can be star students. But understanding the complexities of biology, I'm reading one of the books. I will suggest everyone should read those books, and especially women are very sensitive to these environmental processes. And I'm reading a book. I will suggest it's Visionary Women, and four visionary women of last century. That book has again written, it's been written by a lady, and that book for which she discusses four visionary women who have worked for environment. One is Rachel Carson. She worked, who actually started the environmental movement in 1960s. Another is Jane Jacobs. Of course, everyone knows who is in the urban planning field. Third is Jane Goodall, who worked in Africa, and she said that we are like primates, and she learned the behavior, social behavior of chimpanzees and gorillas and apes, and it was a path breaking that how we can learn from the behavior of these our primate, the earlier generations of human beings, and how we can, what is the takeaway for our society and social formation and that. And fourth one again, which I didn't know, Alice, right, Alice Waters. Alice Waters is the one who works for the natural foods, and she has a movement in US for healthy food in school. So has been able to ban the fast foods and pop drinks. She could manage. So all these women, they are in the environmental movement. And yesterday, somebody was asking me that is it the responsibility of, I think we are more sensitive as women to the environment. We nurture, we care for nature, we care for nurturing the children, for the society. So I think if we are in a large number, we are coming in the profession, but we should consciously work together on this environment and environmental issues and sustainable development. That is my. So does it answer your question?
I think there's another question from Robin Dwivedi, who's
Yeah.
talking about future prospects, challenges, uh, behavioral, psychological changes due to environment. What are the future prospects and challenges with respect to
See,
behavioral, psychological changes?
yeah, as we still are in the middle of pandemic. I am waiting when the pandemic is over. Lots of research will come out of this on behavior. Yesterday, as I said, this one research reported in the in National Geographic was on the role of nostalgia that I mentioned about it. Nostalgia was identified as a disease in 17th and 16th century, and people used to treat them. The doctors used to treat them because it was typical of old people talking nonsense, or they were remembering their childhood and nostalgia. Of course, the number of old people at that time was very small, and they used to think that see, nostalgia is something which is a disease. And 16th, 17th century, a lot of writing is there about this nostalgia. But now the recent study they have carried out in UK, the role of nostalgia, because they have asked people how they are coping with in different age groups. They are asking people how they are responding to this pandemic, and they have identified this role of nostalgia. As I said, actually I included in my slide the reflexive nostalgia, especially people like old people, when they go back and think about their childhood. They think about very happy times and plays and all that, and that is restorative for themselves, and they want to create that. But they also know that those days are gone. Now you can't have well water and all that, but now you have so many other advantages. What else could be done for the future? And that reflexive nostalgia is okay. It's only helps for the time being. But there is a danger of restorative nostalgia, which has been hyped in public sphere, especially that golden age and all that. That nostalgia is very bad for environment. What we are working for, what we had a golden age. Who knows what kind of a golden age? And a golden age may be in the future, but that is not, again, it can be threatened. Like, so suddenly everyone was thinking, everyone was saying that, everyone was rejoicing and saying the triumph of city. If you look at last 10 years books, everyone was saying triumph of city and urban is the future. But what kind of urban? That urban living, now more than 50% people are in cities, and they are going to come again and again. So mostly, if we want to think about future, we have to think about people who are going to be urbanized, They will be coming into cities, or they may be living in wherever they are. We have to provide them urbanized services like water supply, sanitation, basic health, basic education. So the challenges of environment, of course, are there, but challenges of society, especially in India, country like India, we have neglected public health, which we are facing right now. We are facing challenge of basic education. So these two things are important for India. As far as behavior is concerned, one can see how badly US is hit, how badly their population, their behavior is the reason. Our freedom is supreme. Uh, we will not isolate ourselves. We will not wear masks. Even the president said that I will not wear mask. I deny there is a need for. Even the scientists are been. So those kinds of arrogant behavior. There are two kinds of behavior. As I said in my there is a ambience in our ambient behavior is aggressiveness and timidity. We have to have balance in that. And if we know, if we have timid, doesn't mean cowardice. Timid means you respect other people's views as well. Aggressive behavior is something which is attractive to many people. It doesn't take us anywhere. It is a short lived aggressive behavior, the war, the kind of atrocities police are doing, or the kind of behavior many people think with their power. Those behaviors, we have to counter them. They are environmentally bad, they're socially bad, they're economically bad. They are really have to be countered. So our challenges in environment are social environment, economic environment, as well as, of course, natural environment. And natural environment is not so when we talk about sustainable development, it's not just the sustainability of the natural environment, but also the human society and human economic environment, and what kind of work we invent for our people. I was reading every people have come up with robots. Restaurants have come up with robots. So there is all cooks are robots and all waiters are robots. So what will people earn from? And these restaurants are making roaring business in the pandemic. But is it the future? Do we want to shut away all the contacts with all the people? I like to interact with waiters. I like to interact with cooks. What is this nonsense? It's a clean environment, a very sanitized environment. It's a standardized food, standardized service, standardized something. I mean, you love to have a variety. You love to have human touch. I think that environment should encompass not just think about robotics as the future. I think it's. I hate that to think about it. I mean, robotics are doing COVID test. That is okay. At least doctors are saved. I'm happy about it. So sensible choices should be made. Where should we have human touch? Where should not we have human touch? A doctor holds your hand and he takes your pulse. It's very soothing. A robot comes and takes my pulse. I would hate. I won't trust him. But if a robot is taking my saliva and doing test of it, it's okay. So we have to be judiciously use technology. We should not be slaves of technology. Technology not for technology's sake. Technology for certain users one can justify, but not a restaurant. Instead of my mother, somebody brings a robot comes and gets the food in my house. I would hate. I would really hate that.
Yeah.
A child would hate that.
Yes.
So I think the environmental future and shocks, they are unpredictable, unknown, but that's what I'm saying. The environmental shocks are not necessarily only about climate change and sea level rise, but they are and the extinction of species, but they are also about human society and our how we are going to redesign our complexities for human scale and human nature. We have to slow down. That is one of the things the pandemic has shown, that we have to slow down. We have to slow down. We have been going too fast. We can't adjust. Our brain had adjusted over millions of years. And suddenly, if you see your brain, your psychology, your physiological your body. Yeah, well, yesterday, one of my friends was saying that she took her grandson to the national park after so many days. The child of just 4 year old said, "No, I'm so bored. I don't like it here." I mean, he hated seeing the trees. He hated seeing the animals. He hated seeing other people. No, no, no. I want to go back. Please go back. I want to be with my computer or iPad. I think we are killing almost. I said I'll be alarmed if a child does that. If he or she doesn't enjoy a normal um, forest or a seashore and water bodies and clean air, I think something is going to be wrong with our children, and we should be told. Terribly worried about it.
You mentioned about earlier in the lecture, you mentioned about our evolution and how our senses developed as a result of our arboreal, living in the arboreal environment for many, many
Yeah,
years. And I'm just connecting your the various parts of your lecture. So at a certain point you said knowledge and communication of knowledge is important. So the mode of
yeah,
communication, language, I believe, is very important. And today we find that our mode of communication is going very digital. We are into WhatsApp
yeah,
and all
yeah,
these kind of things.
yeah.
We are completely this communication itself is going to change the way our evolution is going to happen
Yes, it
in the
is
future.
going to change because now, in a way, it's far more better that we have so many languages and access to so much of knowledge in different countries, and it could be translated. But if you don't have craving for language, and you are craving only for some dhar 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 music and some images running, you they shut up your brain. They don't make your brain they don't allow your brain to rest, and you become restless. And that is what is happening. If many people who are disturbed when they are doing something, they get disturbed, they attack. So aggressive behavior increases in a man-made kind of environment. So you need to have a balance of natural and man-made environment, and especially the electronics medium and electric mediated by such technologies like robots. I think we should be very careful in introducing them in our day-to-day life, because if children start saying that no, home education is good, they have no touch with the student, the teacher, the other student. They can't play with other students. They can't fight. They can't compete. They can't help each other. All those behavioral aspects are extremely important. In earlier times, when there were families were big, there were many children in a home, and then never home education was possible at that time. But not now. Now you have only one child and three adults at home, and the child loses the childhood completely, and they become adult at the age of 5 and start hating nature and loving only the iPads and iPhones, and they are able to do it very quickly because it's very addictive. But so is nature is addictive. They have to learn that addiction from nature is also a different kind of addiction. When you read about all those environmentalist ladies, I'm so fascinated. They were so lucky. I mean, they could go and they could speak in their language. They transferred that environmental attitudes to a large number of people. Because of them we are here as environment. We can talk about it, but those contributions are extremely important. Of course, everyone uses computer, everyone uses language, everyone uses transmission of communication. But communication for what? What thoughts you are transmitting? You're transmitting aggressive behavior. What thought processes and attention seeking behavior, and I mean, people, we don't know. After the pandemic, I think a lot of psychological studies will come out. They will be flooding the whole scenario. So we should be aware, because already the research has started on many fronts. They have resources, of course, and they have intellectual resources, and there are enough interested people to do research. So we have to keep track of how these unfolds. Of course, and one thing everyone has agreed is, because of the pandemic and slowing down of the economy, Yamuna is clean, rivers are clean, birds have come back, air pollution is less. So there is a direct relationship. One can see that the way we were living, the moment we stopped, of course, environment. I can see so many birds around my home. The trees are full of morning sounds. I really started noticing different sounds around my home. So I'm stuck up at home, but I'm quite aware of flowering trees. The flowers have gone, the greenery has come, this tree has done this. So if you look around, there is a lot of movement happening even in this pandemic. It's not so boring, but you have to look and find out what's happening.
I think that there's a lot of things I would like to ask you, but quickly there's one question that comes to my mind related to the urban scenario where you talked about migration. So
Yeah.
we saw a new phenomenon for the first time. I mean, for the first time,
Yeah.
these people became alive. We didn't even know they existed, sort of. And then I realized that so many people in any city are migrants. Even we are
Most of
migrants.
them.
We are
We are
migrants.
migrants.
And I remember during school days there used to be a certain during school summer holidays we all look forward to going to hometowns, and then
Yeah.
after certain years it became like our Mumbai became our city, so
Yeah.
I guess this is a phenomenon also, that after certain
Yeah.
years this bond gets changed,
Yeah.
and the place that you belong to becomes your place or something like
Yeah.
that.
So it's like that. You can make home any place. I mean, I'm also migrant, and I've also stayed at different places. When I came back in 2001, again it was after 9/11. I got so disgusted. I couldn't stay. I felt I'm outsider in US. I don't want to stay here. I just want to leave. And within a month, I decided, oh, I just can't stay. I can't tolerate this country, because it was so much of hate was there. When I was there, people would look at me, are you Pakistani? My God, it was so shocking in US. And you have seen how racist they can become in
Yes.
recent past. It's aggressive behavior in this time. You realize it in such difficult times. I realized it in US. I'm not safe. Actually, nothing had happened to me. Nothing. That towers had collapsed in New York, but the whole environment had changed in completely different in US. And in November I came back. I want to go home. I want to go back to my place. Otherwise, I was having all the facilities in university, a nice house and all that. I said, no, leave it. I can do my knowledge sharing, and whatever I want to do, I can do at my home. I want to, and I really got connected with these people when everyone was trying to go home to migrants. And luckily for me, I had done a lot of studies, read about studies, and there was a journalist who had studied migration and relation of AIDS, how AIDS spread because of migrants in India. He had a fellowship, and he has written a book in Marathi, and which he had sent it to me. I read it. I liked it very much. Then after that, he was writing about migration, and he wrote a large number of articles about migrate labors, and he asked me to write a preface to the book. So I had an advantage of knowing the problem. And as an architect, I was, Roshini would know, I was also working in BARC. I had given a proposal to the authorities that constantly we are adding construction, we have maintenance, we have construction labors, and all the time I see in the evening migration, the people migrating to the jhopatpattis. Why, if you have so much of land, 400 acres of land, why can't we carve out something and create a permanent residential area for labor? Because you have so much of big establishment, you need painters, plumbers, carpenters, new constructions come up, all that. The contractors may change, the laborers may change, but provide residents, at least a decent housing for those laborers and their families. No, we can't do that. Why not? Why not? It is the attitude. The government pays their labor charges. That is not enough to take care of how they stay and what are they doing and how is their life and from where do they come. The contractors don't take, they just pay their wages. People are left on their own. But you have hundreds of thousands of workers every year employed in BRC or big establishment, all the big establishments, all whole of Mumbai, all the time spenters and all those people, most of them stay in slums. Why can't we provide for them? The migrants may be different. They may go back some. So basically, having sharing accommodation, sharing economy is one of the coming up new that don't own a house.
Right.
You can make a house comfortable for yourself till you are there. So people, average American move 11 times in their lifetime. So there are 11 houses. But when I go to America and I decide to stay for 2 years, there is no problem. I can make home anywhere, small home, whatever I can afford. I can. Everything is that kind of a situation we should have for migrants here
Yes. I think
and the common poor migrants.
I've also been watching on television some of the migrations all over the world, like from the Middle East, Syria,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
people are going to different places and what conditions they are living in.
yeah,
So it's some sort of phenomenon
yes.
worldwide. It needs to be recognized, and as you're saying,
It is,
providing for them is
yeah.
a very important
And
aspect.
if you shut them off, you don't think that is a problem for them. For you, there is no problem. But as I know, I faced as a migrant when in the hostel. After the hostel, where was the house? I came to know of this situation for most of the migrants who got jobs and they didn't have house, and house hunting was such a difficult time. Job hunting and house hunting, those are the two occupations all the young people have to face in the future. So they must start thinking how to provide for them whole their generation. They may not live in where their mothers and fathers are. They are going to be migrants somewhere. So wherever they go, how to make homes wherever you go, and of course you may have hometown. You may for resting, for holidays you can always go, but we have to think of these kinds of situations where you can feel at home for even the migrants, the temporary migrants. And there are some countries, New Zealand and Australia, they provide for all the needs. They have identified the needs for migrants. They teach them the language also. They teach them the customs also. They teach them the systems, how they work, how to take a bus, from how to travel. Because Chinese migrants came in very large number in Australia in 1990s. So they had specific organization to assimilate the migrants into Australian. So those kind of, it's not unique, but for us, we always, these are UPians, they are Biharians, they are not, they should go back. That is the attitude. That is a wrong attitude and wrong behavior.
I think there is a lot to ask you, and I think there's one question here. Migration and reverse migration actually opened new finding out ways to tackle this serious issue. Maybe it's just a
Yeah.
comment.
Reverse migration is happening with American from Indians coming. Even they are thrown out of America, they will come back. They may create problem. They may be of help. But the same thing I had noticed, and when mills closed down in Mumbai, I did a survey with a Dutch firm in Konkan, And suddenly I found certain villages were very prosperous. And going into deeper, I realized that many migrant workers from those villages, they started creating economic activities and regenerating environment by planting trees, mango trees, new fishing jobs, and all those kinds. So there were reverse migration. Again, I came to understand it in 1995, how useful it is. When people were crying that mills are closing down, I was saying, see, the villagers are regenerating and they are having good time. And I talked to them because I did the survey over there. So reverse migration is one of the way. Uh, Anyway, the whole globe is full of migrants. We migrated from Africa to all over the globe. So who is not migrant?
Who is
Everyone
not?
is migrant.
Yes.
There is no one who is at home. Everyone is migrant. So let's treat equally all the migrants.
Yes. So I think that I will summarize the talk because we have gone beyond the time of 5:30, although it's been so interesting and I would like to go on chatting, but we can do that offline.
Yeah.
Sulakshana Mahajan has given us an overview of the subject of what environment psychology is, while at the same time giving us an understanding of its relation with in today's context of the COVID-19 pandemic. And she gave us a view of how all that we are today is a result of years of evolution of our living in the arboreal environment, in the forest, in the jungle, how our senses have developed, and so on, and how we have surpassed in many ways from other animals by being able to travel longer distances. And that's been one of the things, that differentiates us. We are even going to Mars and so on. And she also related everything back to the urban environment and our current situation and scenario, and how we are stuck in our houses, and the importance of certain things, such as she used the word cooperation, sharing. These are some of the things that we also see in environment, and these are the principles that she has emphasized. She talked about premonition, that we all feel, maybe individually as collectively, we as a species feel sometimes some things are coming up, and we need to pay attention to these. The importance of knowledge building process and communication as a means of protecting our own survival. And generally she gave us a message that society and natural environment, these are the two things we need to think about, how we can preserve them. And as far as the challenges are concerned, we have the social challenges, we have the economic and the natural environment as a challenge, all of which we need to consider. We cannot afford to ignore any of them. All of them are important. And so we as a species, as we can say government, because we are all in it together, we need to think about all these things. We have these tools, we have this understanding, and I think it can play a huge role in what we see for our future. And we definitely need to be sensitive. She talked about technology. We need to take a decision whether this technology is good or bad. It is up to us. So we need to take a balanced solution, balanced choice. We need to make balanced choices everywhere. There is no fit all solution. So that's what she has. I think in summary she has given us today. It's a very very interesting topic, and I hope that if there are students here, they can take up a lot of topics from this, cues from this, and do more research on this. There's a lot to do, and there is a lot to study in this subject. I want to thank you for giving us the time today, Sulakshana. And it
Thank you
was a
so much.
pleasure hearing you after a very long time. It felt back to class. Thank you so much, and thank you all the
Thank you.
participants. Thank you all the
Thank you.
participants
Thank you all.
for your
Thank you,
presence.
participant. Though I can't see you, I hope you have something to take home. Thank you.
I just want to probably inform you that our next meeting, our next program will be on the 1st of August, and we are going to look at the proposed amendment to the EIA notification. Uh, I hope that you all will be able to participate in that. We have some eminent panelists there as well. Dr. Sadhna Mahashabde will be there, who will give us an overview of that, and then we will have some experts also. to talk about the, what are the ramifications of this amendment and so on. I hope that all of you will be able to join. And we look forward to many more such interactions. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.